the Arabian Racehorse Podcast with Debbie Burt and Stephen Molyneux.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Arabian Racing Podcast. I'm joined as usual by Stephen Molyneux from Dubai. Hi, Stephen.
Hi, Debbie. How are you?
Yeah, very well, very well. And how's things out there?
Yeah, all good, thank you.
Good. Okay, so we're going to be looking at the first race of the season, which was the Waffle Stallions 0-70 handicap run at Windsor this Monday. And I think the winner, Rebel Afbar, he did the job very well. We discussed, obviously, your limitations, shall we say, on being able to rate him on his sole run in Belgium last year. And I think you did a pretty good job, really, beating a 67 rated horse by, what was it, 3/4 of a length?
Yeah, wasn't a million miles away, I don't suppose, but he's certainly looks a nice progressive horse, doesn't he? I think, again, probably won the race despite the odd sign of greenness. He seemed to get to the front and just idle a little bit. It was a race that really only ever concerned the front two, I felt. Ortar was able to dominate, and Rebel Afbar sat close to that one, and there was certainly an air of inevitability about the outcome. Just Tom Marquand keeping up to his work, sort of edged left a little bit, and just showed signs of greenness, whereas you'd imagine Ortar was probably very ready to go first time out and gave a very good bold show from the front. But I thought it was still a competitive race. I think all six had something to recommend them coming out of the run. The front two were clear of Bin Al-Ri, but he ran on fairly well at the end. G1 wasn't totally disgraced. Jarhez probably could have finished a clear fourth, but for meeting a bit of trouble in running. And as we said when previewing the race, Zion's Hyperion probably doesn't come into his own until his second or third, fourth starts of the season. So I think the connections of all six will be content with how things went.
And going back to Bin Al-Ri, Marco Gianni put over £2 overweight, I believe. So that wouldn't necessarily have given him quite the advantage he had off that weight last year.
Yeah, I mean, he did win, obviously, first time out last year in a very similar race, but probably came up against two better horses for the grade, certainly in the case of Rebel Afbar on this occasion. And as we so often see at Windsor, once they nick away off the front, it can be quite difficult to make any headway. The £2 didn't make any real difference on the day, but he certainly shaped like a very clear third best, and like he was in turn clear of the rest. So there'll be lesser races for him to contest. Certainly there's a 0-55 coming up shortly, and I think Bin Al-Ri will likely be a big player in that, with the benefit of a run under his belt.
And of the horses in behind, I thought G1 looked particularly well in the paddock, actually, quite well forward in his coat, and looked very well. And Jahez certainly didn't look quite as trim as Ortar, so I think there'll be other races for him later on in the season.
Yeah, as an 8-year-old, you can forgive him for carrying a few extra pounds, and he never really threatened to get out of last place, but he did meet a bit of trouble, and probably just cost him a bit of momentum. Like I say, he probably could have challenged G1 for finishing fourth. He wasn't given too hard a time. He'll edge back down the weights on the back of that. Probably still have to contest a similar sort of race next time, but it was a pleasing enough first run of the season for him.
And I caught up with Tom after the race. We can hear what he had to say about the race sponsors and his winning ride, and then also what trainer Phil Collington's thoughts were on the race that was run by Rebel Afbar.
Yeah, it's been sort of a long ongoing theme for me throughout my career that Sheikh Mansour has been sort of supporting a large part of it, in the fact that when I was just out of my apprenticeship, he sent me down to Australia, and I got the chance to ride for David Hayes and Tom Dabenig, and rode a couple of wins for Shadwell whilst there, and things kind of spiralled. Obviously, a couple of years later I went back down there and have been very fortunate to have quite a bit of success, and sadly I couldn't go this year, but I'll be going back again, and so yeah, that all stemmed from that initial trip down there, sponsored by and brought together by Sheikh Mansour.
Super. And just a little word about Rebel Afbar. Obviously that's his first run in the UK, and his first run of the season, and obviously it was quite green when he ran in Belgium last year. What did you think of him?
Yeah, look, he's still a bit green and still learning, and he sort of did what he had to do, but to bump into much more experienced horses around a tricky enough track in Windsor, he's done well to win today, and as I say, hopefully there'll be more to come from it.
Yeah, so tonight I thought, obviously we've learned a lot more about him. Great that he's won. Tom came back in as usual, told us a lot. He would probably step up in trip, would be beneficial to him, as we'll see, watching the race back again. The others, including the second, obviously have had a lot of experience, so he'll improve again from this run experience-wise. And no, it's great, And then I think the horse is obviously very genuine. He's always seemed to us like he's very genuine, and he's not over big, but he's got a big heart.
We now look ahead to our second race, the Emirates Breeders' Maiden Stakes. That's going to be run over a mile, or just over a mile, at Wolverhampton this coming Monday. We've got a field at the moment at entries up to 12. Unfortunately, we're recording this. Literally, declarations have just opened, and obviously we're going to have to be doing this one blind today. Unfortunately, I haven't got any steer on jockeys. A little bit of an idea of who's going to run. I saw Paul Simmons at Windsor on Monday, and he thought that though Zakada Zayn would get an entry, he thought she was probably not going to be quite ready to run just yet. He'll probably sit this one out. And again, I spoke to Phil after we talked about Rebel Athbar, and he thought he'd have 3 of his 5 entries going. We can hear a little bit more about those 3 runners from him now.
Yes, I think at this stage I plan on declaring, well, I'll enter probably 4 or 5, but most likely I would like to run the Clear Athbar, Cafu Athbar and Al Ghazal. So Clear Ladder run in February at Mons, where she was second. She'll have learnt a lot from that. So she's had a little bit of a break and come back, and she seems in great form. Yeah, I do like that little horse. He's very much, like you say, in the mould of his sire. Again, he's not over big like Rebel Athbar, but he's all heart. His work's been very good. And yeah, looking forward to seeing him run. And Al Ghazal, so he's actually a full brother to Al Aziz and a half to Lulwa and Ortar. Again, he's another one that a Clear Athbar will dwarf the pair of them in the paddock.
So they're going on to a Clear Athbar. Obviously, that's one you've had to have a look at, albeit that not gained a rating yet. She unfortunately haven't got any video of her finishing second in Belgium, but as Phil said, he thinks she'll appreciate the drop back in trip.
Yeah, she's well-bred sort, isn't she? Out of Menard Athbar, who finished 3rd in the Hatter International here back in 2014, I think it was, when Jankade Forge won. The Dam also won in France, and having had the benefit of a run already in Belgium is certainly of benefit, as we saw with Rebel Athbar last week. So definitely an interesting newcomer to racing in England, and it's probably quite a good little race, isn't it? We've got some horses with proven form and ratings already. We've got the splash of the Shadwell influence, as we'll still continue to see for hopefully several more years to come in the one potential newcomer in Al Ghazal, and obviously those that have raced, and highlighting the increasing influence that Athbar Stud are thankfully having on racing here in the UK. So it promises to be a decent maiden. I think there are 4 scheduled maidens through the season, all roughly over a mile. So there'll be 1 or 2 trainers keen to get them out early, and this will be a nice stepping stone for I think it's Windsor on the 13th of June, and a couple of runs, and some of these horses will be eligible for handicap marks. We've gone back to the old system this season of wanting to see a horse twice before giving them a mark, unless of course they win.
And speaking of handicap marks, we've got a couple in here that already run quite a lot in handicaps and are now coming back into maiden company. Some of those most of those are the James Owens horses. We've got Satam, Al Mahbouba, Balkis in particular. What do you think of their chances? They're probably going on what he said at his open morning at the end of last month. Quite possibly they could show up on Monday.
Well, it's the perfect chance for them, isn't it, to win a maiden? Ordinarily, you'd perhaps say they're a little bit vulnerable. A rating of 77, for example, with Balkis should more often than not be good enough to win a maiden, but he is obviously having to concede a little bit of weight to the 3-year-olds in there. But Balkis, she's got the The consistent form, she's been placed on 4 of her 6 starts, including in handicap company behind a useful horse last time in AJS Hajjaj. She's only had the 1 start as well for James Owen, so could easily build on that rating of 77. And it could well be a case of her just needing to turn up and run to that sort of figure to be good enough to win this. Obviously, the newcomers, if they are above average, then she'll be vulnerable again. But she's probably the one in the race that you can set your clock by. Satam is probably more likely to need the run, missed the entirety of 2021, but his best effort came when finishing second to Al Shamikh at Wolverhampton, where Nasser was back in third. So that piece of form probably reads quite strongly in this sort of race. He did struggle to back that up afterwards, but one of those runs came in a Group 1 and also ran in Belgium. So, you know, if the absence isn't too much of a detriment to him on Monday, then he's probably the one to beat on that piece of form. But there's probably just 1 or 2 more question marks hanging over him. And Al Mahbouba's the other one, a bit more exposed, had plenty of starts in France. And to me, just looked a little bit sour, I thought, last year. Had chances in a race to go and win, but she just seemed to hang fire a little bit. I know Arabians carry their head and tails awkwardly at times, but she seemed to do it a bit more than some of the others. And I just wonder whether she was perhaps a little bit sour from her French runs. And I suppose with the back of a winter in England, she could sort of get back, but I'd say she's vulnerable on form and probably a little bit on temperament as well in this sort of race.
And another horse that had a couple of runs last year, Labois, had 1 start for Phil and then joined the Connollys. I thought last year she was very much a frame and really looked quite backward in her runs and probably should do a bit better this year. Yeah,
I think 60 was obviously on the back of just that first start, which came in a tricky enough race to assess. I think it was novice company, and she was obviously up against it against some better types. Finished well behind Balkis and Al Mahbouba last time, and probably they might have one eye on a 0 to 55 handicap further down the line. A couple of those coming up as a 0 to 60 at Chepstow as well. So I would say 60 is maybe harsh on, well, certainly is harsh on what she's done on those first 2 starts, but will hopefully improve this season. And you can't underestimate getting a run into them and then finding the rightful grade next time where she can be more of a player.
And we've got down the bottom, we've got 2 3-year-olds probably. We've got Kathu Athbar, which is a half brother to Badur Athbar, who Phil trained for the same connections to win on her debut at Chelmsford a few years back. She went on to win a listed race in Saudi Arabia. What do you think of maybe that one's chances?
Yeah, on paper, it's quite enticing, really. Bred, as you say, very well related to Badur Athbar, who was rated 97, I think it was, in the UK, and went on to win a couple of races in Saudi. You'd obviously say that Phil Collington's horses would improve for the experience. And how ideal is it, a 3-year-old taking on their elders? It's hard to say. They do receive plenty of weight. Kathu Athbar will be off 8 stone 10 compared to the 9 stone 10 of the older horses. Obviously, the equivalent of a 2-year-old thoroughbred taking on a 3-year-old at this time of year, you wouldn't even really consider, would you? But it just feels a bit different with the Arabians being 3. They've had a bit more time and experience, etc. So on paper, very much a big player. It's just how much of a culture shock this first start's going to be up against those proven handicappers.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw him towards the end of last month, and for a 3-year-old, he did have a very mature outlook. He was not in any way green. He went out onto the heath, led the horse that he was with, and he looked very laid back, and he could well stand quite a good chance off that weight. I suspect probably a Khalil, because she's had that run out of his 2 Athbar horses, will probably have the edge, and she is much bigger. You heard there Phil saying that she'll dwarf Kathu Athbar and Al Ghazal, who is very much on the small side in the paddock. But size isn't everything, as we all know. So and speaking of size, the other one of James is Mayfair. She's a homebred filly and she's a first foal. She is very small, but she looks very, very fit. So she'll be in there off of 8-6. And I wouldn't be surprised if she did a good show on Monday if she shows up.
Yeah, I mean, obviously James is well renowned for getting them ready first time out the dam. Was more of a handicap type and a low grade handicap type as well. Fina de Bos was, I think she won twice off marks in the high 40s, low 50s. So, yeah, on paper you'd imagine she might just be more of that sort of prospect, but pedigree doesn't always conform to fact. So we could see something different from her. But the Athbar horses are interesting. I mean, you'll probably know more than me about their sort of initial upbringing, where they're bred and broken in, etc. What sort of process would they have in their early years?
Well, they originally, Athbar obviously were breeding in the UK, and a couple of years back they switched to France. I think their last crop would have been 4 years ago. The UK breds are now all bred in France, and that Phil often gets them to break in. So most of them he'll have started off from the very beginning. So he'll have a good handle on their abilities. We may have Al Hattab, a brother to Al Tabari, who was quite a useful handicapper for the same stable. He won a couple of times at Wolverhampton over a little bit further, and was placed twice last year. This video was taken back towards the end of April, and as you can see, he's a little bit on the large side. Pete's hoped to have given him a little practice session at Wolverhampton beforehand, so he possibly might need the run. Going back to France, we had the first of the UAE President Cup runs in Europe, which was won by Hattal, who was a winner of the Derby when Satan was fourth. Did you catch that, and what did you think of his run?
I've not seen the race. I did see that he won. I've got a feeling he was actually in Dubai and supposed to join Majid Al Jahuri, and he was supposed to run in the President's Cup back in that would be February, wouldn't it? I might be talking complete rubbish there, but I've got a feeling he was supposed to be and just suffered a little injury. But he's proven to be a real money spinner, isn't he?
It was a really easy win, actually. Sorry, I should have prepped you about that beforehand. But yeah, it was a very easy win, and we'll look forward to see. I mean, who knows? He might be one that shows up for Goodwood, but he's obviously had a little bit of a patchy career because a horse of. I mean, he's out of Misna, which is obviously a horse which has done very well for them and winning the Kahala Classic. So you'd have thought we'd have seen him out a little bit more. Going on with the UAE President's Cup, America, they've got their stage coming up this weekend at Pimlico as part of the Preakness Stakes weekend. Piers Dargan of Equine Medi Record, who is of course our partner in the podcast, he's out in America for that meeting. He's involved out with that the recording of the medical records of the horses which are running in the Preakness, and of course the UAE President's Cup. He sent us this little video, which we can watch now, of his time out in America so far.
I'm currently here at Pimlico Racetrack, which is getting ready for the Preakness Stakes, as well as the UAE President's Cup. Here working with Equine Medi Record to ensure the best equine welfare protocols are followed. Just wanted to say we're really excited to be sponsoring ARH this year, and are really looking forward to Arabian racing in the UK.
And that concludes our programme for this week. Hopefully the forthcoming maiden will give us quite a few pointers on where the various stables are with their horses, and there should be some quite nice horses, I think, coming out of the race that we can follow throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, it certainly looks a good race. I've just gone back through my old messages. It was Hayan, not Hattal, that was in Dubai. So just correct myself before I receive a barrage of abuse. But yeah, going back to Windsor, it does look a good maiden. That's what you want to see. Interesting newcomers, proven horses, and it should be a good race.
It's Wolverhampton.
Wolverhampton, yeah. It only began with W.
Marvellous. Well, look, thanks very much for your time, and we'll speak again next week. Thank you.
No problem. Cheers, Debbie.